The Retirement Cafe podcast, stress-free account closures after a loved one's death with Vicky Wilson of Settld. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Retirement Cafe podcast with me, your host, Justin King. If you're thinking about your retirement or already retired, you're in the right place. My aim is to help you plan for and live a successful and meaningful retirement. Retirement is far more than just a financial event. It's a significant life event, a major transition, which will bring with it new challenges and opportunities. So each episode contains tips, information, and inspiration to help you feel more informed and confident about your retirement. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hello and welcome. I'm so pleased you could join me for this week's episode. This week, I'm excited to share with you a conversation I had with Vicky Wilson. I met Vicky on a training course a few weeks ago where she was discussing the work that she and her company are doing around bereavement. I was intrigued by her business and the passion she has for it and wanted to learn more. In 2019, Vicky sadly lost her grandma. Like everyone else who's lost a relative, Vicky and her mother were then faced with all the admin that comes with dealing with the death of a loved one. Eventually, all accounts were finally closed, but the stress that they went through to get there will never be forgotten. The number of times she repeated the words, "My grandma has died," seemed endless. Vicky and her mother realized that there was a gap in the market for a service that could deal with this and set up Settld. Settld removes the stress and difficult admin that follows a loved one's death. In our conversation, Vicky and I discuss the amazing work she's doing with her new business, Settld, the story behind Settld, and what bereavement standards are, and why industries should be working together to standardize the bereavement process. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Vicky Wilson. Welcome to the Retirement Cafe podcast, Vicky Wilson.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Now, Vicky, many of our listeners won't know who you are. Now, I came across you and was inspired with what you're up to because you were a guest speaker on a webinar for Solar members the other day. Now, for those who don't know that, Solar is the Society of Later Life Advisors, which I'm one of them. If you're looking for later life advice, find an advisor who is a Solar qualified member. But you were on the webinar in essence to provide continuing professional development for Solar advisors, and you were telling us all about your new company and service, etc. And I went, wow, that's fantastic. It's called Settld. Tell me all about Settld.
Yes. Okay. So Settld is the private sector equivalent of Tell Us Once. So for anybody that's sadly lost a loved one, they may have come across the public sector service, which will go and notify DVLA, council tax, other public sector departments of the death. We went through this process when my grandma died. So we used Tell Us Once. We thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
But what we found was there wasn't the equivalent to go and tell the banks, the utilities, the insurance providers, the pension providers, the telcos, all of the other entities in the private sector in one easy, straightforward way. And so we built Settld. So it's very much formed out of our bereavement, our experience of bereavement. We wanted to try and put that right and solve that problem for other families.
So let's slowly strip this back to the basics, because unless you've done this, or done this recently, you don't know how much of a challenge this can be. Now, obviously, in my work as a financial planner and working with the retired community, we come across people dying, and if you think about it, you're suddenly faced with that bereavement. And that's obviously always going to be quite an emotional aspect of sorting that out. But then you kind of get down to the nitty gritty, don't you? Of doing the jobs of, oh, well, I've got to tell the bank, and I've got to tell, oh, that bill's that I know. If it was a spouse, well, that might be going to my husband or my wife, or therefore I need to tell all these people, and the list goes on and on and on, doesn't it? And it's like, and this is not a fun job, is it? Because we're all faced by call centers, and people who, press 17 for the next operator, and we really care for your call, but the waiting time is only 90 minutes. And I mean, in my world, insurance companies, bless their souls, hard work trying to get through to it, not only through to the company but to the right person. So it is this is a tricky problem. So how does Settld solve this?
Yeah, it's a real problem. So as you said, if you think about 500,000 people on average die per year in the UK,
right.
Most people will leave behind 15 to 20 accounts. So that's your financial, your digital, and your household services.
Okay.
And that process of having to go and contact all those different companies takes most people around 6 to 10 hours. And then it's up to 2 months of chasing back and forth, trying to get things resolved. So Settld is designed to be one very simple, safe web form. Okay, so we've gone and done lots of different audits with lots of different industry providers. We know what they need. We know what information they need to collect. So an individual is asked to upload their information, the death certificate, details on the person who's died, and then we take care of the rest. So they just submit one form, and then we send out the notifications to each and every company simultaneously. We can either go and request the account to be closed down or transferred under another name. We'll ask for things like, please take off Mrs. Jones from the marketing communications so that Mr. Jones doesn't have to keep seeing his deceased wife name appear on letters if the letters are being sent to the home. And we essentially manage everything back and forth. So we act as that the intermediary. Everything is tracked in one safe space. So there's a dashboard that the user can see. And so really, I mean, there will be cases where the individual, the notifier, will have to go and talk to a bank or an insurer. But for 95% of the cases that we're seeing, we can actually take away all of the admin. So you just have one central place. You can see what's happening at any given time. And it just means that for families and for professionals, they're spending maybe 15 minutes undertaking that form completion process versus 6 to 10 hours of going back and forth and dealing with a headache. Yeah.
Amazing. Now, I can see maybe that if this was going on and I heard of Settld and I found that there's a couple of things that I would worry about a little bit of, well, who's allowed to do it? Who's allowed to open a Settld account and start closing all these accounts? How do I prove that it's okay for me to do that?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. We know what documentation the relevant organisations are going to need to see. So before we do anything, we have to have the proof of authority and the letter of authority or consent to act, right? So if we don't have that, we cannot proceed. There are then various questions that we'll ask. So if there's a will, we'll take that copy of the will. We won't send it out unless it's absolutely needed, but we use that to verify who the person is and their relationship to the deceased. We also have Onfido as our verification partner. So that's the anti-fraud ID check. So we'll do a biometric facial ID recognition check, and we'll also go and make sure that the document against the person who is sending out the notification is valid. So it's not a fraudulent copy of a passport or other means of identity. So we know what needs to happen. We know which individuals the organisations need to speak to. There are cases where we'll go and have to go and talk to other executors, but on the main part, we're able to deal with the individual who has notified themselves as being either a professional that's acting on behalf of the deceased, so that could be a probate practitioner, or the next of kin, or somebody that's in the immediate line of personal representation for the person who's died.
Right. Wow, you've definitely thought about this. Straight away then, I'm thinking this is expensive. This is, I mean, you're going to take away 8 to 10 hours of my painful life, or take out the pain out of my life, not a painful life. I've got a lovely life, thank you. But
I'm glad to hear that.
8 to 10 hours of something that I really don't want to do. Yeah. You're gonna charge me an arm and a leg, aren't you?
No, we're free. We're free for the public. I love that intro though. Set that up lovely. No, so we're not charging a penny to the public. We're completely free. We do charge professionals who use us, but we are free for all members of the public.
Wow. Wow. And okay, so how are you funded then? Because I really need to dig in a little bit more than that. There's something, not many things are free in this world nowadays.
Well, as I said, so we charge a nominal fee to our professional users. So the idea there is obviously we're giving them back efficiency. We're allowing them to deploy their staff to other higher value areas. And that means that we can run for free for the public.
Right.
We're also having conversations with service providers, because what's happening is that as volume comes through, we're aggregating lots of data so we can understand where organizations are doing things really well and where they could be doing things better. And so we're able to have those commercial conversations as well with partners on the other side, but we're completely free for families to use.
Wow. Wow. And am I right? What's the kind of structure of Settld? Is it a limited company, or is it, what is it? Right?
Yeah, we're a limited company.
Okay. And you've in essence started in this COVID pandemic period.
We did actually. Last week was the first time that 5 of our team were able to meet. So
Wow.
we've been working completely remotely for about a year now, recruiting great people, but many of them just have never met face to face, which is it's a strange thing. But yes, we started just before the pandemic. So my grandmother passed away at the end of 2019. And I had this idea. I was working for Amazon at the time. I took a sabbatical from Amazon, went to explore the idea, 3 months unpaid leave, and thought, I've got to give this a go. This is a real problem. A lot of other people seem to have this problem. And that's where it started. So just as COVID was becoming a reality and wasn't just that thing in China, we were starting to build up the concept for what Settld would or could be. And here we are a year later.
Wow. So talking of Amazon and all these other service providers who we've never met and we're never going to see, and the Facebooks of the world and all these types of accounts, can you close those?
Yep. So we correspond with 750 organizations now. Right. And that number's increasing because obviously as we see more volume coming through, people are sending us more obscure accounts that we maybe hadn't considered, or they weren't the immediate ones on the list. So yes, we're able to close pretty much all of the main players, and anything else that comes through, then obviously we'll go and reach out proactively to those organizations and tell them who we are and start engaging with them too.
Wow. And this is really is genuine interest, because sadly I lost my sister last year.
Sorry to hear that.
And I don't quite know what's happened with her Facebook account, to be honest, but I have a feeling it's still in existence. And maybe even her passwords are not known. So how do you get around? How do you, I can imagine all these kind of digital things, people's photographs on. I mean, I've got a, what have I got? I've got a Apple account as well, so I've got photos there, etc. I can imagine that. Well, I'm sure even Kathy doesn't know, what all the passwords in are. Well, you change them quite regularly because I'm a bit on top of all that type of thing. So, every few months there another randomized password.
Which is very organized of you, actually. I'm impressed because many people don't do that.
Well, so. I am in the kind of financial world, so yeah. I'm a little bit kind of careful with this stuff. But are all these people open for you to be talking to them and kind of closing these types of accounts down?
Yeah, we've been amazed actually at how responsive and how welcoming of this idea the service providers are. We have to obviously show that we've got consent to act, so it's absolutely imperative that we have the recognition and the approval to be that interface, to be that intermediary. But as long as we've got that permission, then we haven't had any significant pushback from the providers. So we've been really lucky. And the other thing that we're also doing alongside the build of Settld is pushing for what we call a bereavement standard. And so the idea of that actually is to bring together various different cross-industry leads who are responsible for the bereavement experience, the customer care experience, to try and understand how do we get to a stage where things are better, more streamlined for customers, way beyond what we would do with Settld. It's really about changing policies, changing processes, pushing on things like, why are we not at the stage at the moment where we could have everybody submit a death certificate in digital format? What do we need to do to get to that stage so that people aren't being required to purchase multiple paper copies? And so when you talk about, assets, if you like, when it comes to your Facebook or your Twitter or all the various different digital assets, that very much falls within the remit of the bereavement standard, because until now, bereavement really hasn't been a very sexy thing to talk about. I mean, it's still not, but the pandemic has shone a light on the fact that there hasn't been a standard. It's not a regulated area, that different companies do different things, and actually that makes it very confusing for a consumer or for a customer who is dealing with the dizziness of death. There's tons of things going on, and actually a lot of this stuff will be alien, right? So unless you've actually gone through a bereavement, you don't necessarily know what are all the steps to take.
No.
So there's a lot of work to do with the bereavement standard as well, but some really encouraging progress has already been made.
Yeah. And I mean, you can also, I mean, I'm sure for the insurance companies of the world, I mean, to be honest, they must have a nightmare, really, because I know that the amount of lost, or what they bizarrely they call orphan assets, policies that are never claimed, policies that are never paid out. And actually, I mean, you might think, well, that's really great for an insurance company because they're not having to pay out. but actually, it's all a pain in the backside for them as well, because actually they continue to have to write out, they continue having to do statements, they continue having to kind of administer those funds, when actually they I honestly do believe their intention is to get the assets to the right people, but unless they're told. So I wondered, Vicky, whether would it be possible? I don't know where you plan to take the business, but I'm kind of imagining that. I wonder whether you could do a pre-mortem, so that I could come along and I could register all my kind of stuff with you already, and maybe let you know who I think is going to be my executor, or the person who will contact you in the event of me getting trampled by a herd of elephants.
Let's hope that doesn't happen. It's also unlikely in the UK, but yes.
maybe at the safari park or something.
Very unlucky.
But would it? I don't know whether that's possible yet. Would that be possible to? Because we try, and obviously we know that death is going to happen to our clients at some point, and therefore we talk often about let's get everything in order. Do we know where the power of attorney is? Do we know where the will is? Do we know where all the estate documents are? Is it if one of the next of kin, if something happens to you, do they know that we're your advisor and we've got a copy of everything that you're going to need? And I'm just
absolutely,
but we don't get involved in electric bills and that type of thing. But I can imagine thinking, well, if we set up this service before it happens, that'd be a really great thing if it was available.
Yes, it's a very natural product extension from where we are now, and actually we see it in some of the behavioral analytics. So there is a subset of users who store documents and give us details and then just never hit the submit button. And when we go to them and say, is everything okay, can we help you, they're, oh yeah, no, that's fine, I'm just getting ready. So there's definitely room for us to explore that area. I think we just wanted to make sure that to begin with we were able to satisfy that main pain point and really take that away and build something that is secure and reliable and gets the job done. And now that we're really satisfied with what we've got, and this is early days, but we're happy with that product, then yes, we can start looking at different ways to make life easier, not just after a death has occurred, but as people are thinking about and getting ready for things.
Brilliant. So people are now listening to this and they're thinking, fantastic, I want to know more about Settld. Is it only you have to hit a website, or do you have a website and an app, or what do people actually have to do? Where do they find you, and how do they access your service?
Great. So they can go to settld.care. So that's the website. We're not a mobile app yet. We are a web app.
Right. And all they need to is spelled SETTLD. Is that right?
Exactly. So we've dropped the last E. Yeah.
Okay.
So they'll go to settld.care and then they can hit a nice big button to get started, and it's really, really simple and straightforward. So they just need to give us their initial details, and then they'll be taken through a form, and that is literally it. And then at the end of that form, they'll have everything that they need, and we'll keep them updated with progress from that point on.
Great. And then presumably there's some kind of security that they have for when they log in and log off and that type of thing.
Yes. Settld was actually designed by somebody who back in his earlier days was paid by big financial institutions to try and hack into their security systems. Right. So it's been, so it's been designed by somebody with an obsession for security, and it follows all the various protocols it needs to. And we're running on AWS, which is one of the most secure cloud providers. So we hit all the security ticks.
You've still got links in with your Amazon.
That's it.
You can't escape.
Never. It's true.
AWS is Amazon Web Services for anyone who doesn't realize.
That's true. Yes.
I'm showing my geekiness. The professionals that you work with, so kind of the probate specialists, so that'll be lawyers and some accountants obviously can do probate now. Do they hit the same website, or is there a specific place that they go to kind of work out how to use your services?
Yes, so because we're still fairly new, we launched to probate practitioners at the end of November 2020. We've been doing one-to-one onboarding sessions with those firms. So it's a similar process. They'll reach out to us, and then we will get them set up in the system. We'll show them how it works, make sure that we've answered all the questions that they might have. But we do plan to actually build in onboarding into the website fairly soon, so they'll just be able to go and self-serve. But until now, it's been more of a one-to-one relationship with account managers on our side.
Brilliant. Anything I've not asked you?
No, I think you've been pretty thorough. Well,
I was really, as I say, when I first met you and heard you talk, I thought, oh, well, that's fantastic. What a wonderful.
Thank you so much.
You've identified a problem. You're providing a solution that is going to be really worthwhile. You're providing it free to the members of the public. I mean,
I know, I'm told I'm crazy.
What gets better than that? Well, you're giving something back and you're charging the lawyers. I mean, plenty of lawyers do listen to this, so forgive me. The problem is the lawyers will then pass it on to their clients. But anyway, that's just the way it is. People have a choice. So, well done for providing.
Thank you so much.
A service that really is needed. I mean, Gordon Bennett. I've sat on the phone trying to get through to providers, and I'm alive, let alone trying to do it when I'm deceased. Or someone having to do it.
I was going to say you'd be amazing if you were doing that from the grave.
Maybe we can come back and haunt some of the bad providers.
Yeah, interesting concept. No. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast and the show. It's really, really appreciated.
No, really, really great. Thank you once again, Vicky Wilson. Thanks once again to Vicky Wilson for sharing her story with us. To find out more about Settld and bereavement standards, check out the show notes on our website at theretirementcafe.co.uk, where you'll also find some useful links, including one to sign the bereavement standards petition. As ever, if you've enjoyed this episode, please do leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, as this really does help more people like you to find us. I would like to thank Dibby Boy for taking the time to write a review after sitting down and recording an interview with me, which will be released in a few weeks' time. He gave the Retirement Cafe podcast a 5-star review, saying it was an absolute pleasure to speak with Justin. Can't wait to listen to the podcast. Thank you, Dibby Boy, otherwise known as Ian Dib. Did you know that all the podcasts are available to listen to or watch on my YouTube channel? If you prefer to watch my conversations, simply head to YouTube and search for Justin King MFP. So until next time, I'm Justin King, helping you feel more informed in your retirement.